Hi, everyone, and welcome to a very special episode today because I'm going to be having an interview with a subject matter expert in the topic of what today's video is all about, which is unlocking open source AI for education. Now, most of us have no idea what open source AI even means because we're familiar with ChatGPT from OpenAI, but this is something completely different. So come with me as we have this great interview and really start to learn about all the possibilities and the benefits that can come from open source AI. Hello, Tom. Welcome very much to our video here, this little interview that we're doing. I really appreciate you taking the time to come here. This is Tom Bendien, everybody. And you are an open source AI expert. Is that right?
I guess so. Thank you. Yep.
Okay, well, thank you again very much for being here. Now, the thing is that I think that there are a lot of people that don't fully know about all of this. And before we go into you fully explaining what open source AI really is, can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you even got to know this topic?
Yeah, no, thanks, Brent. It's great to be here. Appreciate you hosting me on your channel here, of course. So I would say, uh, open source AI is definitely for the folks that are, slightly on the geek spectrum, shall we say, and the DIY spectrum. Um, so I think I've always been that way. I've always been a tinkerer. People have called me a tinkerer. I always like to experiment with things and try things out and look at new ways of doing things. And so my career has sort of taken me through around the world, actually. You probably noticed my accent. I grew up in New Zealand, worked in Europe and the UK and the US now for quite some years. Um, but I think I've held what I would call, more traditional, like, sales engineering and sales positions at a number of large IT-centric companies like, IBM, Oracle, Cisco, HPE. I've also worked in some online media companies like America Online, for those who remember AOL, the
Oh,
running
yeah.
man, right? And I've spent a lot of time working in live news production for companies like ABC News, right, where I would actually run the tech around the world, running SATCOM gear and just adapting to situations on the fly and presenting and telling stories and all that sort of thing. So I kind of have this sort of somewhat diverse background in tech, in doing both startups and large IT companies, software, hardware, and cloud services, and also some of that creative side of it in terms of creating media experiences, whether it's news or online. Um, and so, of course, when AI came along with ChatGPT, I was like looking at it immediately, saying, "Oh my gosh, this thing is a game changer." But the problem at the time, and kind of still is to some extent, is that it's a closed box, right? It's proprietary, it's closed AI, and so you couldn't really tinker that much with it. You could still do things, sure, but you're still dealing with kind of a proprietary closed environment, kind of like Microsoft operating system, right? There's a lot of developers on Microsoft by all means, but you can't get in and do stuff at the kernel level, right? There's a line there where it becomes closed. Whereas with open source AI, kind of like Linux, right? Everybody I think knows Linux is an open source operating system. There are millions of Linux developers and apps out there. I became very excited when I saw AI starting to go more in the open source direction, with of course the Meta Llama models coming out early in 23. So
Okay,
yeah,
so right there, you just mentioned the llama model. And again, my audience doesn't fully understand a lot of this because, again, this is something that this is very new for a lot of us. They're
yeah,
still trying to fully understand Chat GPT. Now,
yes,
the llama model, that came from Meta, right? Facebook people. They
yep,
created a large language model and then they made it open source. So that
yep.
means that it was freely available for anyone to use, right? And then how does open source AI, how does that tie in by using that? Can you explain that whole process to us?
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yes, that's an important point. So, it's the equivalent of saying, you can install Microsoft Windows products like the operating system applications on your own computer. You can absolutely do that. There's an element of DIY there as compared to buying it in the store, having everything preloaded, or having your IT department preloaded. Um, taking that same analogy to the Linux world, again, the idea is that the Linux open source operating system was offered for free download. There are hundreds of versions of Linux out there. And so you can now do the same thing. We can download the entire AI large language model, which is the software that basically is a big bunch of code, if you will, computer code, kind of like an application, right? It's kind of like, it's just software, right? It's a software code. It's being trained to contain lots of data. That's called the training data set. During the training process, a neural network is developed, which is essentially all the data points in the data set that the LLM's been trained on. And then there are all these relationships that are developed inside the model where the different elements or aspects of the data points or the data sets have relationships created around them, which sort of point a data point to a related data point or something else. So it's kind of called the neural network. So again, that's just the large language model itself, which is one component of what you need. It's kind of like putting an engine in a car. An engine by itself doesn't really help you. You have to connect it to something to make it do something, right? You have to put an engine in a car to actually create a transportation vehicle, right? You have to put a lot of stuff around the engine to actually make it useful for doing something. So in the same sort of vein, a large language model is just the code that is very expensive to create because, of course, it takes a lot of GPU horsepower to actually ingest all this data and then transform it all to numbers and then create all the vectors and all the stuff that goes on inside an LLM so it can be used. So again, the LLM in itself is one component. It's kind of like the engine. You need to build a lot of things around it to actually build a web user interface and experience like what you see on things like ChatGPT.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, at the end, I'm glad you ended with ChatGPT because that's something that most of us know, right? In academia, we know about ChatGPT. We've tried it. At least a fair amount of us have tried it. So in using that as a comparison, you have ChatGPT or you have an open source
Yeah.
system using an open source LLM.
Yep.
What are the differences? Meaning, like, what would be the benefits? Why would I want to use an open source system as opposed to just using ChatGPT?
Yep. Thank you, Brent. That's a great question. What I'll do is I'll refer specifically to the platform my company has developed in this regard with all open source components, right? So just to clarify, the platform we've built is an end-to-end solution that we've built and are testing with educational organizations. We also have commercial clients using it. And the big thing that everyone loves about it is data privacy. Data privacy, right? So what's important about the cool thing about open source software is you're now fully in control, right? It's literally now AI has now become essentially like enterprise software, right? So we now basically have everything down to a number of open source software products, which some of these products are widely used in enterprises today. We won't talk too much about it, but Linux is the operating system. It's all Linux. We have dashboarding technologies in there too, open source. But the big thing is data privacy because all the chat sessions, all the user data, all the documents that you might upload to it, the data sets you create, and the AI assistants that you might create are all private because they're all on this software instance that is being deployed specifically for your school. And that also means that you can now tailor the way that AI interacts with your faculty and students to suit demographics, location, curriculum, all the things you care about. You have the flexibility because you can now create teaching AI assistants and learning AI assistants. There's two different types, right? It's a different way of interacting with AI. One really cool thing that we found in our internship program we ran over the summer is that some of the students have been able to create their own personalized learning AI assistants, right? So for example, one student was saying, hey, I want an AI assistant that gives me SAT practice questions in a certain way. And another student said, hey, I'm learning calculus and I'd like an AI assistant that will explain to me step by step how a problem is solved so I can more clearly understand that problem solving process. So what's super cool about that is with our platform being all open source, it's infinitely flexible. And so it can be tailored and deployed and managed directly for an organization like a school or what have you, um, to suit everybody or different role personas there with total data privacy because all the data stays inside that private software platform. Um,
Nice.
and then the last thing we'll pick up on is a little plug for Grok. So Jonathan Ross and my friends over at Grok, we use their inference engine, which is not based on a GPU like a typical NVIDIA GPU that's widely used. There's some new technology coming out to run inference, which is the process of using AI, that is significantly more power efficient because, of course, load on our electrical grid is very important, but even more important is environmental impact. So the other thing we're doing is because we're not locked into the way some people run their AI, we've now been able to choose very environmentally friendly ways of running inference. And so we've actually reduced the carbon footprint of our platform by about 80%, 80% less than the closed AI providers. We think that's very, very important.
Wow, that's really impressive. So let me see if I can quickly summarize. So you're talking about it has enhanced data security for like student content, student information. That's all added security that you can have with open source, and then the
Yep.
flexibility by having data sets that is whatever the instructor puts in there, the AI is going to function that way, and you can have
Yep.
personal AI assistants or
Yep.
personal learning assistants. And then this whole environmental aspect, that's really powerful because that's something that comes up again and again when talking about AI literacy in general is critical thinking. And then within that, talking about the environmental impact. So that's really powerful to know that using open source can be 80% more efficient, like what you're doing with your instance. That's wow, that's really impressive. Okay, so in talking about all this, actually implementing an open source AI sounds a little bit more complicated than me just simply logging into ChatGPT. So, what are some challenges that an instructor might face wanting to use an open source AI like you're talking about?
Yeah, that's a great point, Brent. Uh, I think the answer is that deploying what I call a full stack open source AI solution is complex. We've spent a year, a year and hundreds of iterations of software versions and feature upgrades to get where we are today, which I think arguably is a rather a good platform. Um, but I think there are levels of deploying open source AI, right? So in terms of, I'm running workshops this fall in a number of US locations where we are showing people how to build their own small AI home lab, right? So we show people how to download open source LLM models. We use a inference engine called Ollama, Ollama. Nothing to do with Meta, but Ollama, the guys over there, have done a phenomenal job in making it very easy to deploy a small private AI home lab on your computer. And you don't even need a GPU to run their AI models they have, right? So they have very small AI models that you can use for a small lab or learning about using open source AI, all the way up to very large models that we also use in our platform. We do use Ollama in our platform. Um, and then in terms of building a home lab to learn about it, there are a couple of open source projects like Open Web UI. So Tim Bake over there in I think he's somewhere in Vancouver. He actually is running a project with Open Web UI, and again, it's a really nice, easy to deploy open source software that many school kids that I've had on my capstone programs and things have built these things as labs themselves within 15 minutes, right? I have detailed instructions on my website on how to do it. So in terms of deploying open source, I think a good starting point is to take a run at trying some of these open source labs. They're out there. I have them on my website. But then when you start getting a little further into it, you know, you're going to need some help, right? You're going to need some help. You can figure out how to do it yourself. It could be a very interesting research project. It could absolutely be a very interesting research project. There's very well documented open source AI groups out there. There are many YouTubers and people on X that are doing these things. The thing you probably will want to do is find a service provider like ourselves, right? This is what we do every day. who has put the whole thing together and has made it work in a cohesive manner, right? So that our platform out of the box, it includes the open source LLMs that we've chosen. It's Grok for inference. We have the web UI layer, the vector store, the document store, the whole thing, all the role-based access, two-factor authentication, all the observability dashboards, right? I just threw out a whole bunch of stuff. This has taken us over a year to develop all this. So what we're doing now is we're making that available to everybody to say, hey, by all means, we recommend with open source, you do a little bit of DIY to learn what it's about and get an idea and all that. If you have an opportunity, see an opportunity to do a research project, by all means, have at it. There are people out there, and such as ourselves, that will help you with that. But lastly, for a full production deployment, you can come to an organization like ourselves and maybe a few others that actually have built this thing that's ready for prime time, and that where it is more of an out of the box experience. However, it's fully transparent. You know exactly what's in there. You have influence over how it's deployed, and then you can enjoy using it without being locked into anything in particular, right? So
Okay, so again, trying to summarize, because again, there's lots of
unpack all that
information there,
stuff.
right? Is so this can be done as far as this is something that an IT department within a university, let's say, they could start to put this all together, but it takes a lot of work because there are lots of intricacies involved with all the different open source components to really be able to use an open source AI. So it can be done.
Yep.
But also the other possibility would be to use a service like your own, like your company, that would handle all of that. It would still be completely open source, all the flexibility, all the environmental savings, and all of the data security, because again, it would be created in an instance for us as
Yep.
a university or a school. So those are different options, doing it in-house with IT or using an advanced service like yours, right?
Yeah, and it could be hybrid, right? So oftentimes
Okay.
we'll actually work with the organization, but again, because open source, it's very easy to connect to it and to interact with it. Um, and we can adapt and modify the software components we use to suit the environment as well, in at all levels. So it's a lot of fun. It's like you've got a baseline configuration, but you have a lot of opportunities to customize and tailor to the use cases, to the environment. You know, um, you can literally run this on standalone computers in a training setting. You can run it fully hosted and managed by on our platform. You can run it on any public cloud. It's just you deploying all the software. So you have a lot of flexibility as compared again to being locked into the way that the closed guys do it, because they just have their way of doing it and that's it. With ours, you're basically do whatever you like.
Okay, I mean, that sounds awesome. That sounds like lots of possibilities there. Tom, can you tell the audience how to best get a hold of you and your company and some more information?
Sure, yeah. So probably the quickest way is to hit me up on LinkedIn. So I'm at LinkedIn, Tom Bendien, pretty easy to find there. Um, we've been we've been so busy building open source AI software, we haven't actually gotten around to building a website yet. So the website is lacking for my commercial business. I also have a nonprofit that's focused on education, and so we'll put that in the links below. But it's GT Cyber Labs. So my nonprofit GT Cyber Labs, we're focused on supporting education. We can be funded through grants, foundations, and other things, benefactors, folks like that that can fund us that way. Um, so we do have a website there with links. So we have a bunch of blog posts. All the things I mentioned about the home labs are all there. So yeah, so in terms of commercial business and commercial clients, probably LinkedIn is the quickest way to reach me.
Great.
But then also from seeing some things we're doing, you can by all means go to our nonprofit website.
Great. So they just get a hold of you through LinkedIn, and then with that, they can contact you and set up a demo, or you could talk about pricing and implementation and all
Oh,
that.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we have a an available demo platform there. So we do have, and we'll put in the links below, we have a evaluation platform intake form where we ask folks just to tell us a little bit about their use case and things of a such.
Mhm.
And we can get you onto our demo platform immediately. It takes a few minutes. We set up a call, talk through your use cases, help you understand how to use the platform. And again, the cool thing is data privacy, right? So we can set you up with a private login on our demo platform. You'll see some of the out of the box preloaded assistance we've built for everybody to see But then even for folks like yourself, Brent, you now have a login to our platform. You're able to create private teams and private AI systems you can use that will not be visible to everybody else, right? So that's again, immediately you're seeing the ability to create a private AI experience and have flexibility, right? So that's we can do that anytime for anyone can reach out to me.
Great, awesome. Well, thank you very much, Tom. I appreciate your time here, and I really appreciate you breaking down this new aspect for a lot of us dealing with open source AI and really unlocking it for education. Because to me,
Yep.
it seems like it's very powerful with lots of possibilities and really addresses some of the issues that we have with regular closed AI like ChatGPT, especially issues with security and the environment. So I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, just to kind of bring it home here a little bit is I think I strongly encourage all educational organizations to look closely into learn having their students do some small labs and learn how to run open source AI. Very inexpensive, very quick. Um, they're going to have to learn how to use this in the workplace. So we need to figure out how to bring that responsible and ethical use and some governing principles and guidelines on how to use it. Um, and by all means use the closed AI services as well, and just understand that's just like that one size fits all model. It has its place, it has its use cases. I think that the open source and the more specialized models and apps are going to be the where it really goes in future. And then absolutely looking into companies like Grok that have this really excellent approach to reducing the carbon footprint of running AI inference. It's critical that we all become aware of those guys and the great work they're doing, because of course we can't afford to be burning all this coal and oil and natural gas to run all these AI data centers. It's kind of going to have a slightly negative impact there. So, yep.
Awesome. Okay, thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. And thank you, everyone, for being part of this video and joining me on this very special interview with Tom. I definitely learned a lot, and I think we can really see that there are lots of benefits here. So it's something to really consider as we move forward with how we can integrate AI into education. So by thinking about this, we can see how we can unlock the power of open source AI within education. And as we continue to learn more about AI in general, develop our AI literacy, we need to understand that the way that we can continue to benefit is by continuing to learn from one another. This concept, other concepts, all sorts of things will continue to change. So it's important for us to continue to develop this type of community where we can really learn from one another. And remember, learning is for life.